gave us those last meeting.
Yeah.
Now 6:30 and call the meeting to order. Members present: Mike Ahern, Chairman; John Ranlett, Vice Chair; Rhonda Bishop; Paul Wilson; Pat Roach; John Kelly; Dick Lewis as the Selectmen's representative. I think I got everybody. Item number 3, public comments. Okay. Item number 4, administrative matters. We're going to review the minutes. We're going to start with January 5th. Anything on page 1?
Yes.
Okay.
It's fairly significant also. It's under report of committees. That paragraph needs to be rewritten, and maybe I can do that.
Please.
But let me just explain. The land was not donated to the Conservation Commission. An easement on the land was donated to the Pemmy Baker Land Trust, and the Plymouth Conservation Commission has the right to make hiking trails through it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, so that a land
And
easement.
Yeah, and in fact, it says land on Old Hebron Road. It's Old Hebron Road and Texas Hill Road.
Would you mind rewriting that? This was, I believe, our
Yeah, that's
former
what I said.
transcriptionist, so, and I'll just.
Yeah, I'll rewrite that
update
as a paragraph before.
Sure, thank
An
you.
easement on land on Old Hebron Road
Right.
and Texas Hill Road has been donated.
Has been granted to the PBLT, Pemmy Baker Land Trust. And I'd say, well, I'll rewrite it. And the Plymouth Conservation Commission will establish a hiking trail network.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a different synopsis.
Yep.
Page 2?
Yes, I think where it says except should be exempt, I believe. Plymouth State is exempt from site plan review. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Where is it, Pat?
Like the 4th bullet down. Starts with your name.
Third of the way down.
Yeah,
Plymouth State is
it is
exempt.
exempt.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay. Page 3? Page 4? Okay, we'll move on. Oh, we need a motion to accept the minutes from January 5th.
So moved with the exception of the rewrite.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Okay, takes care of that. January 19th. Anything on page 1?
So they were accepted as amended?
Yes. Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6. Motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
January 19th. Second? Mr. Ranlett, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay?
And I abstain because I wasn't present at the meeting.
Okay. February 16th. Anything on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Page 7. The last one, we're going to have to go slow because that just got put in front of us. So let's do motion to accept the minutes of February 16th.
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes of February 16th as,
I second.
Second by Mr. Roach first.
Okay?
second first.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay. Now, we'll go a little slower on March 15th since that was just put in front of us and see if we can get through it. Anything on page 1? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Motion to accept the minutes of March 15th.
So moved.
Mr. Kelly, seconded. Ms. Bishop, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Okay. Now, that brings us to item number 5, correspondence.
There's nothing outstanding.
Okay. Item number 6, board committees. Anything with the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Lewis?
Not really, just everyone's happy to get through town meeting, and I'm the new full rep to the planning board. Ray is the alternate.
Great. Conservation Commission, Mr. Wilson?
Nothing to report tonight.
Zoning Board?
They met last month for a very minor application, merger of separate lots, which used to be Fairgrounds Village subdivision out on Fairgrounds Road.
Right.
And New Hampshire Electric Co-op bought that for right-of-way, and it was fairly low-key.
Water and Sewer District, Ms. Bishop?
Nothing to report.
Pemmichewasset Local Advisory Committee, Mr. Kelly? Okay. Plymouth Regional Emergency Management Committee, Mr. Roach?
They have not met, so there's nothing to report.
Okay. Town Planner Report?
Two items of interest. As Mr. Lewis said, he's our new rep to the planning board, which is great, because Dick is a professional planner, so you can't go wrong with having two of us. And both Paul Wilson and Rhonda Bishop's terms were up this year, and they have both submitted letters to the Board of Selectmen for reappointment, so that's good.
Beautiful.
Continuity, hopefully, and that's about it.
Okay. New business, item number 7. Upcoming master plan revision. We need to look at and choose a subcommittee, discuss the status of the implementation plan from the 2007 update, look at original timelines and meeting schedules.
Well, if I could just speak to that for a minute.
Sure.
It's definitely a project where we need to keep on top of it, and I need to nag you, and we all need to worry and bite our nails, because otherwise we'll procrastinate and it won't get done. So that having been said, I think this precise agenda for tasks tonight might be a little premature. What I did find, though, going through all the paperwork on the previous master plans, I found the introduction mission statement, which I think I gave to you before, but it has a timeline of all the meetings, public hearings, and subcommittee meetings and things that were held the last go-around. So I thought if we all had a copy of this, because you know how I love paper, we could at least see what the requirements might be. And if we feel that what the last bunch of folks did was too much or too little, then we'll at least have some sort of reference to go against. So I'm going to pass those out. And I'm also going to pass out the table of contents from the last master plan, just to show, in a very general sense, the different committees that, you know, deal with these different facets of the master plan. There are 3 volumes. Oh, lovely, I wrote over, and then I didn't copy the other side. Well, I can tell you what it is. And if anyone was working on that before, which I think some of you were, perhaps you can remember precisely which subcommittees you had. I know there's, you know, housing and arts and recreation and national economic development and natural resources, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just kind of cheat sheets. And hopefully everybody is still going through the implementation plan, which is that checklist, just to see what everyone's individual opinion is on whether we've accomplished the goals or whether the goals are obsolete. You remember I passed those out?
Yes,
a couple
last
times
time.
ago?
Yes. I remember.
Okay, good. I know it's a lot of paper, but it's only going to get worse. So,
Thinking.
So we're thinking we need 3 subcommittees at this point?
oh, I think you need more than that. Do we want to just brainstorm now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Anybody recollects what?
Were you here?
I was in on the tail end of it after it was pretty much done, and then,
It's all new to me.
There was housing,
Housing,
economic development,
economic development,
natural resources.
Housing.
I know one,
excuse me, it's described as historic resources, but, I'm sorry. There is natural resource, there's natural heritage policies.
Right.
And then there's historic resources, so they're 2 separate.
right, so, well, actually, Chapter 2 in the table of contents says a sense of place, natural heritage and cultural heritage, so I think
should
that's
find that.
those 2. I just see natural resources as more environmental, but that's probably too limiting, so should we say cultural and historic resources? And if we find we have 2 subcommittees, we can always combine them. I don't want to make this too burdensome.
Cultural.
I know there was an education subcommittee, because I saw something on that. Transportation,
There's community facilities and services,
Wow.
education, transportation.
arts
don't
and
know if people make those
recreation
committees.
is separately here.
Seems like that should be combined with cultural. You would create a division between cultural and arts and recreation.
No, that's fine. I'm just seeing, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any other general categories?
I have 8. I've done this.
You want to touch on? Was there a future visioning subcommittee, or that's just kind of, I mean, I know that it's a summation of the thing, but I mean, was there any people that were expressly feeling about it?
well, there's also regulations. What, is there a subcommittee just on regulations?
I wasn't involved directly, but I don't remember anything.
Well, let me see, a couple.
Because that's what I was involved in, that part, Rhonda and I.
Was that more for like looking forward to zoning changes maybe or something?
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Land use, land use,
Get wrapped up in the future land use.
Yeah.
because they went heavy into that 5 years ago.
Okay, well, I'll put land use / zoning just for,
But, you know, we've been, over the last 5 years or so, we've really, as something comes up, we take care of it. And I don't know if there's many issues that are left.
well, that's why, and then, I mean, you know, an update is just a snapshot of your progress, or if there's something that comes up that, you know, you didn't have to deal with before, so that's why I keep saying, do your checklist, just to get everybody's personal opinion on whether or not you think this has been accomplished, because on this other it's part of the master plan document, but that section, the implementation plan, you know, it says who is supposed to have done whatever, and by what time they have had it done. At least, you know, that's good.
I don't think there's very many people that are on that committee the master plan. Don't want to vote on it. I am, you know,
Ms. Bishop?
other than that.
No. Well, see, the thing is, I see these committees that have found some paperwork, there was a lot of input, which there should be, from the citizenry out there, but I guess, you know, planning board members are sort of the chairs of the subcommittee. Is it running well?
I know Mr. Miller said that he wanted to be involved and be on a committee, or,
Well, shall we put Shall we combine any of these 9 categories? Dick said arts and recreation, maybe with cultural and historic resources.
I almost think we could split them up into, everything into 2 subcommittees and split this planning board up maybe and into 2 equal parts and put a couple of,
One thing I would like to suggest, though, is we should have somebody from the college, from the university on that committee. And I talked to Paul about it, and he said he really advisable to do that.
Yeah, I had spoken to Steve Tasker, because we just try to communicate on their master plan and our PSU's master plan in the town, so I'm sure they'll assign someone, absolutely.
I'm not too awfully sure about the hospital, but they do. We get employees of the town. At least we ought to get some of that input on it.
because I'm almost thinking that, would you be present in just about all those subcommittee meetings? Or
Not necessarily,
but if
because,
there were 2 subcommittee,
yeah, I don't understand what you mean by that, Mike, if there were 2. What do you
if we split the board up 2 equal parts, there wouldn't be, we could, if economies of scale, we just know what we're doing on one section, then move on to the next and keep moving through it.
I guess I still don't understand.
Rather than having several different
You
subcommittees.
mean just cut the list of subcommittees in half and
If
have
we could
half the
find
folks
re-
work on everything?
if we
and
could have-
down the list?
Have it related somehow, that's less meetings for a staff member to be at potentially.
Well, I don't know. I think it was separate before, but
They also hired, I think this group that they hired must have done a lot of the work too.
yeah, they did. They
Yeah,
did.
they did.
And the planning board might have had it a little bit easier.
Well, I know that the subcommittees had a lot of meetings on their
They
own.
did.
Yeah.
On,
It-
were they forming the direction of where they wanted this hired group to go, or were they more of the meetings to, how can they get the town behind
I think
it?
a lot of that was due to the economic activity during that time, more than it was almost to planning for a generalization of where the town was going. Because all the meetings that I went to had a lot to do with the new enterprises that were trying to get into Plymouth, and they were trying to regulate, like Tenny Mountain Highway, which actually isn't a planning board's responsibility to indicate individual activities that are allowed or not allowed in a certain section of town. I know their main thrust was on Tenny Mountain Highway, and I've read this thing over about 4 or 5 times, and it was trying to keep the core of Plymouth on Main Street and trying to make sure that unfavorable enterprises were not being built out on Tenny Mountain Highway.
So all that, all the goings-on, that the housing crunch with off-campus housing and economic development, and everything just happened to fall into the time frame when the master plan update was
Right.
due, is that what you're saying?
Right,
So there was a
right.
lot going on
Yeah,
to that extent.
Yeah, that, and they didn't go, as far as I know, they didn't go a lot into zoning as far as that's concerned, because like Green Street is still agricultural, and you couldn't stick a tomato down there on Green Street now because it's got everything, the road and the parking area and everything. And I think probably they sort of went over that very quickly because they were afraid. They were pretty concerned about what was happening out on Tenny Mountain Highway because everybody and his brother was
That was the boom.
yeah, well, that was a boom time, and they didn't want that to look like a strip mall. It doesn't now.
The community attitude survey, and that's in this thing I passed out, was summer of 2004. So
Yeah.
the last update was actually passed at the town meeting in 2008. I think it got, if I understand correctly, it got a little stalled out between 2006,
It did, yeah.
2008,
Yeah.
when it got passed at
Yeah,
town
yeah.
meeting. So
Yeah. It got stalled out about 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
there, and,
because I know there was a housing, a big push on a housing survey and all kinds of stuff. There again, that's why you know, if anybody's got any input, please tell me, because I wasn't here then, but that's why I really think that it was a very comprehensive job done on the last update because of all this going on.
Yeah.
Just happened to be the time of the
I think-
season. And that's why that checklist is so important, because I
Yeah.
think...
I don't think they planned out the next 10 years or so. They were more interested in the current problems that they were facing at that time to stop a lot of this,
Right.
you know, building and a lot of businesses going out and
Well, it's-
unfavorable
I
businesses.
mean, an update can also just be a ratification or a re-ratification of what's existing with some tweaks. I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be a whole
Be a rewrite.
ballgame, so...
I think probably if we went over it in the subcommittees and if we decide we don't need to do anything, we don't do
Well,
anything.
that's what I'm hoping the first step is for all the subcommittees to take page, whatever it is, 20 through 41 with the checklist that look like this, and find their section and just go back and forth and say, have we accomplished this? Is it relevant? Does it need additional work or updating, or is it obsolete?
So do you envision we need 9 subcommittees then? Or can subcommittee take 2 things?
Can we group these kind of by genre, sort
Yeah.
of like Mike said, by category, by general category, 2 or 3? And then just kind of knock them off, start, yeah, 9's a lot, because you only have 9 people, so
Yeah,
it
right.
gets to be a chairman.
I was wondering if we get by with like
Right.
4, you know, 4
Yeah,
or 5.
exactly.
I mean, I guess I'm kind of in agreement with Mike. I mean, if we're really going to treat this as an update, I mean, I think having 5 or 6 or 7 committees is a little bit of overkill. And people are just going to get burned out on, you know, death by meeting type stuff. I mean, I look at some of these things like education. I mean, I would definitely group that with something else.
Yeah.
I mean, education really isn't even anything that a master plan could have any kind of a significant impact on.
I mean, what the master plan is talking about is what is within the town for education. It kind of gives a brief summary.
And then what are the goals?
And I know that the sentiment of some on the planning board back then, when we were finishing up, was next time we do this, let's go through the whole thing, let's see if we can simplify it, take out some things that aren't necessary, update some of the charts and tables that had information, stick in there, identify what we can update.
Yeah.
And that we did a lot of work last time and maybe not as, it can almost be skimmed through. I don't know if anybody used that word, but it might be an easier process this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the approach.
Well,
I mean, I guess, I mean, now let's toss out one idea for potential ways maybe to approach meetings is that, I mean, we talked about, you know, a half-hour meeting tonight or an hour meeting tonight. You know, if in a regular planning board meeting or a regular planning board workshop, if we met for an hour and then did an hour
Right.
on one
Right.
or more topics, either as a full board or as a subcommittee. And I think we can kind of work through it pretty methodically and
Yeah.
We could meet an hour before the planning,
get
before
rid of a
these.
lot of stuff. It's,
Yeah. Well, I was and this is very helpful because I'm, in trying to get some format to this, I was only looking at what I saw before, and John has, you know, made the very salient point that there was so much on everybody's plate then. That's why, you know, from the paperwork, it looks like people were meeting with 10 other people 3 times a week, which maybe they were. But it was a bunch of different things that were drawn into the master plan process.
I think the master plan last time got sort of waylaid by all of the activity that was there. And the way I understand the master plan is to be a very general
It's a guide.
guideline to the future. And it doesn't have to be, they got right down to saying that on the master plan that on Tenny Mountain Highway, the only things that they could have out there was metal storage houses and stuff like that, and that isn't really what
We
a
don't have
master
to
plan's
update that
about.
information, it can just, we can identify what things can be just wholesale removed out of it.
Right, but I think, that's right, and I think it has to be
Right.
much more generalized
Or
than-
just
than what it
notations
was.
to that as to what has occurred in the interim. So, yeah, no, simple is better, as long as we
Right.
do our duty. So let's get these, maybe these subcategories into
I mean, we could almost meet here an hour before, split up into our 3 groups between 1 room, 2 rooms, and there's a 3rd meeting room up here?
Yes,
Bathroom.
the select.
Or, someone at this table, and then somehow the chairs, and then the 3rd. We could
Yeah.
meet 3 different areas pretty easily an hour before a meeting, once a month, until we get moving.
Well, do we want to take a stab at grouping these? You want me to
Sure.
group them, or do you want me to
Go
read
ahead.
off what we've got?
Look what we've got so far.
Okay, we have housing, economic development. I'm going to put environmental resources rather than natural. And then we have cultural/historic resources. We have education. We have transportation. We have community facilities/services. We have arts/recreation. And we have a general category that says future land use/zoning. So, somebody take a stab. I can do it, but I don't want to be bossy.
I think you can put transportation and community facilities together
Yes, you can.
as a beginning. And then I would put cultural, arts, and recreation, education together. It's kind of has some similarities. Seeing arts and recreation are part of education.
If I could just make another observation, when I look under natural heritage policies, a lot of that said was assigned to the Conservation Commission. So if it would be of help, what I could do is review it with the
be
Conservation Commission first,
Yes,
and then I could report back
that
to
would
the
be
board.
wonderful.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much.
It appears that housing and future land use
Yep, should go together.
regulations. should-
Housing, economic development, and future land use, I
Sure,
think,
put
because
all 3
economic
together.
development
Yep.
and housing directly relate to
Right.
future land
Right.
use. So there you go, kids.
That's
All
3?
right, that's 3.
Beautiful.
All right.
Now we'll just divide up the board, we'll add in, we'll see what we can get for a college rep for each subcommittee, or
Well,
I think maybe,
those that apply.
maybe do the subcommittees first, have a couple of meetings, and then...
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
I
would be
think it'd
best.
look better if we get organized
with
first,
cultural
and then we'll do the outreach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even if you just had it on the housing and the education on that.
And then should we talk to the hospital at some point? or-
Yeah, the hospital could be
Yep,
brought
yeah,
in on,
because
it could be,
I think they were on it last time.
yeah, and I think they could actually be the housing and future land use, because I know they're pretty active in that.
I'd also like to get an invitation possibly to Bill Hool, if you'd like to.
Who's that?
I think he mentioned that before.
He was very involved last time, and I'm sure he would be willing to do it again, I would think.
And
Nice
what
guys.
about Ray Gosney? Do you know if he'd be interested?
I would expect so. Some committee, I'm not sure.
I think he was heavily involved before.
Yeah.
So how did the other 2 wind up with? What wound up with transportation and community facilities?
Transportation is with community facilities and services.
And what's the 3rd one in there?
2, 3.
You have historic
Where is it?
resource.
I've got environmental resource with the Conservation Commission, I call it the Concom.
Okay.
It's freestanding right now.
Okay.
Transportation.
Transportation, community facilities, I thought there was a 3rd
Transportation,
one.
economic development sort of is a major umbrella for a lot of things, so I don't,
We have that with housing and land use.
I think that might fit better with transportation, community services.
What's that?
economic development?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I would think so,
Okay.
yeah.
Messing up my paper. You're messing up my paper.
Okay.
Did I look at it?
I'm just kidding,
Or is
you're
that
messing
you?
up my paper.
All right.
I mean,
moving
as I
on.
said, these aren't all necessarily mutually exclusive, we're just trying to break it down. Housing,
Housing goes with
future land use. And education was with,
Cultural, arts, and historic resources, does that make sense?
was with arts and recreation.
Yeah, and there's historic resources? Put 3 of them in there?
Well, that's a start. That's a start. We can fine tune this. So we have 3 major well, we have 4, but Paul is going to carry the burden by himself right now to the Conservation Commission and then bring it back.
Once again, just to get their
Yeah,
input,
yeah,
then to bring it
yeah.
back to the board.
Yep.
Can I
Yes, Mr.
make
Kelly.
a suggestion on the subcommittees and so forth? I might be a little concerned about bringing in other people other than the planning board right at the beginning, because the first thing you'll know that you know, one person will say, gee, I'd like to, but why, you know, I'm friendly with this fellow and you've accepted him onto this subcommittee. I'd like to be on the subcommittee, and it could sort of get out of hand, and we could have the same element as we had before of not being in a general situation and going down spurs of self-interest sometimes.
Yep.
So I would
So we'll get
suggest maybe
together.
if we just did the planning board at first, and maybe at that point, if you had a certain person that you wanted to talk to about what they did before or something like that, that you could call them in, and they could, you know, discuss it with you at that point.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
I can understand the big picture objective here. It's to revise the master plan and then ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, bring it before the town of Plymouth at
Yeah.
town meeting.
Yeah.
So at some point, we are going to have to involve the public.
Yes.
Because if it takes place in some kind of a overly, I hesitate to say secretive, but an exclusive rather than an inclusive way, and then it gets sprung at town meeting, then I think we're setting ourselves up also, so for it not to be well received at town meeting. So I think maybe not the first meetings, but at some point, we're going to
Right.
have to involve more than
I
just the
believe
board.
in the bylaws or whatever it says, I've read it somewhere, that it has to have public meetings,
Yes,
three
oh,
public
yes,
or four
yes.
public
Yeah.
meetings, so that's
hearings, yeah.
already been determined.
Right. We just,
I wasn't trying to say the total public, I'm just saying individual people, we could bring them in to you know, to discuss it or something like that, but it might be just as well if we just kept it within the planning board for a moment.
Mr. Rainlet, do you have a comment for us, or do you have a
No,
preference? on
no,
what-
they covered it, because again, about the last 10 months, they had 4 public hearings, and a lot of
Right, they're all
after the
here.
first public meeting, then some of the people got with the different committees, and then for the second one, and the third one, and then the
think,
fourth one, by that time.
John, wasn't it, a lot of it had to do with the zoning?
Right, they'd done a lot
Tremendous
of work.
amount on the zoning,
They'd
right?
done a lot of work
And I think-
before they brought it to the public.
Yeah, and I think
And I
we've
think-
really got to dig into that to see how that,
I think it'd be better to have the public hearings maybe sooner, rather than
Yeah.
the example that they did last time.
yeah, I think so, yeah.
Mr. Rainlet, do you have a preference on what committee of the 3 that you'd like?
the environmental resources will also be out there too. It's just that
So
Paul's going to do
Okay.
a little lead work on
I'll
it.
take that.
And I would love to see Mr. Rainlet on the Economic Development, Community Services, and Transportation. Does that sound like a good fit?
Sounds great.
I think you've just been volunteered.
And then, Mr. Lewis, do you have a preference? Because I know where I'd like to, committee I'd love to see you in.
Well, I mean, sort of, I mean, just doing what I do for a living. I mean, I'm, you know, obviously interested in sort of the future land use and zoning and, you know, that kind of thing.
Westman's Holiday.
Yeah.
And Ms. Bishop?
Mr. Rainlet?
Education, community services, economic development.
Mr. Roach?
I prefer to be on land use and housing, but if you have another need.
No?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Pat?
Land use and housing.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Mr. Kelly?
Economic.
We have no one for education, arts, and recreation.
Well, it's not huge at this point. Maybe you can get to it after and just reassign. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's important, but there are no hugely pressing issues. I don't think you're going to build another school.
It was my impression in reading that document that portion of it, I don't think is controversial or has changed very much, so I think that's just a matter of review.
Right, you're not building a new school again, and, you know.
This is what I was thinking, that if you got on a committee and it happened to be a committee that everybody flew over, you could sort of substitute onto another committee or things like that. It's not so steadfast that you gotta go home if you don't have a committee.
Mr. Kelly, did you say future land use, or did you say community services, economic development?
He said economic development. I heard him say.
I would love to be on, unless I missed anybody at this point, I would love to be on the future land use and housing.
Okay.
And I'm wondering whether this education, arts, and recreation, if kind of split it up somehow.
Well, we can get to it at some point. As we said, I think it's pretty well covered. It's a fairly static issue unless you were building a new museum or you had no arts and culture or we had need for new schools. I mean, I'm not ignoring it, but maybe you can get to it after, or I can kind of babysit it, overlook it, or you want me to do that? Sure. Why did I say that?
So we pretty much split up the board between two committees with Mr. Wilson looking at conservation,
Yeah.
and Ms. Penny on education, arts, and recreation. So if we could meet to maybe an hour before the next, are we talking next meeting, next?
I think next meeting is going to be kind of lengthy. We'll be dealing with BICO's approval extension.
No, next month, this meeting, next month.
Next work session.
At the work session, we will be.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, there were no applications that came in for next month's either meeting, so we have both those dates open.
The meeting at the end of this month? The next one?
We have both the work session meeting, which is May 3rd, and April 19th, right. There are no applications for a public hearing meeting. So we've got two blank spots coming up, April 19th, because we have nothing on the agenda for applications, if you like, or we can take a break. And we have May 3rd.
19th would be good.
I think if we've got nothing coming up for this month, I don't think there's anything pressing to push us to really start this month out as a master plan, unless we're going to already be here.
I wonder if we could do it the 19th and just go into a regular planning board meeting and then just split up and go in your subcommittee at that point.
Use the 19th as a work session?
Yeah. Do it after instead of before.
Do it, make a very, very short planning board meeting and then get into the committee.
Well, that's where, now that everybody knows, they can focus on their homework, although you really should read the whole thing, the back part with the checklist, and see if you concur.
Well, just so I'm clear, is BICO coming in the 19th?
Well, BICO's Mountain View Farms site plan approval date expires on May 5th. So you can give them an interim extension. I'm waiting on some feedback from Attorney Radigan. I hadn't done the math today that the deadline had just passed for new planning board applications for the 19th, so didn't realize that was free until we just discussed it. So I don't know when we want to do BICO. It's kind of just floating there for a minute until I hear from Attorney Radigan on a couple of points.
What's he weighing in on? I mean, just the process, or?
The process and the specifics. There's been another letter back from Mr. Blackie, and I just had to ask John Radigan a couple of clarifying things. I mean, he essentially, I passed out his last letter to you all.
Yeah.
In which he re-verified, not to digress too much, but he re-verified the fact that the previous board did not give, there was no vesting on their site plan. So now this board has to decide how to move forward in view of the fact that their original approval expires on May 5th. So you'll be getting some more information, and we have to decide when we're going to discuss that.
How is this situation right now in regards to the people, the neighborhood and all that? Are we so-called off the hook at the moment?
Well, I'm waiting, I've written to John on that too, I'm waiting back on that, I should hear any minute now.
Because I would
But you
think,
mentioned that last meeting.
I would think that that would govern what we do, because if we give them an extension for X number of years, I think this is the time that we've got to either, we got to settle that now, and then after that, say, okay, now we can decide as to how many years you want to do it, because if we give him the extension, you might as well.
Right.
forget about it.
Part of our agenda tonight was going to be, and it still can be, item number 2 under new business is that drainage thing, and then we were going to look at the most recent Blackie letter, but that's off the table right now because we're not ready yet.
So I'm thinking that on the 19th, we, at 5:45, we have the floodplain subcommittee meeting with Mr. Kelly, Mr. Wilson, and myself, and hopefully Ms. Penny, at 5:45. Then we have our regular meeting, which could be very short, and then whenever that ends, we go into our subcommittee for the master plan.
Right, but we don't have to have a regular public hearing because there are no applications,
Correct,
so you can
correct.
substitute
Right.
and go right into your.
Okay.
right
So
into
now,
the
let's
sub-
move to item number 2 on item number 7, number 2.
So did everybody get that?
Yep.
I got it, but I'd caution that I won't have a chance to meet with the Conservation Commission before the 19th.
That's fine.
So we need to sketch out a timeline, documentation items for Mountain View Farms, drainage issues to create recommendations.
Do you want to handle this, John? I've got, once again, another copy, or the same copy, an additional one, of Mr. Vignali's report of what did and did not transpire. Remember we said we were going to do kind of a timeline? I'm going to hand the ball over to you on this. Just, I guess, was the upshot of that was so that we could have a clear delineation of what transpired and where this board has gone in identifying who owned what in terms of drainage and drainage problems, blah, 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 blah.
Well, my thoughts are maybe between now and the 19th,
Okay.
you and I can get together
Okay.
and put stuff together
Okay,
and then present it
okay.
to the board.
That's fine.
Have something that
Well,
we
I
put
think that's a good
together.
idea, because then if they disagree or have other input, they can. Okay, that being said, does anyone need another copy of Mr. Vignali's report?
Nope.
Just to,
Well, if you've got,
I've got
that's
him,
it.
I
I'll
have him
take.
from before.
Okay, so that brings us to item number 8. Yes.
Just on item number 2, on the Blackie Mountain View Farm issue, I mean, to me, it seems like a very critical issue is the fact that their alteration of terrain
Oh,
permit has expired for that project on the hill. And the end result of that new application that they will need to file with DES will have a significant impact on what they build, how they build it, and how, in my opinion, this board should react to their plan. I mean, I think they're kind of having to go back to, not quite square one, but they're a lot closer to square one than they are to the finished line.
plus, other development has occurred since that original thing was put forward.
Other-
Plymouth Woods, I mean, physically on the ground.
Well, yeah,
It's there, so,
yeah.
you know, it's a.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, I think until they get their alteration of terrain permit, I don't think we should do anything with an extension or any kind of approval for this project. I mean, I hate to, I mean, it's a pretty hard line, but, I mean, that's a pretty
Well,
critical piece of
yeah.
development.
Yeah,
There's clearly
I don't know if we're
issues.
talking about this now, or we'll be talking about it next time, but that would be my inclination. I mean, I passed out the letter from, the most recent letter from Mr. Radigan to you folks a couple of meetings ago. And he said, although, you know, the process was, the terminology, the discussions, the conversation was somewhat vague, and maybe there were misunderstandings, you know, and this is the second time he said it, you know, with all due consideration to Mr. Blackie, and perhaps he was thinking the board was going one direction, they were going the other, that the site plan is not technically vested, period. So,
I mean,
food for thought.
I guess maybe I would also just make the suggestion or request that, I mean, next time we talk about this, it'd be good to have the approved site plan for the 44 units or
I'm
whatever
looking
it
for
is.
that. Yeah.
I mean, if we don't have it, we should ask Harry or
Yeah.
Dale.
I
to
don't
get us
even
a
know if
copy.
we do, because I don't know how far this whole thing got. You know, other than preliminary, as part of a subdivision. I haven't seen any great details, but, you know, I'll ask him. I'll call him.
I think it was very preliminary on that 44 or whatever the number of units on that condominium. I think basically they said, we'll build these 2 houses and then we'll see how things go, and then we'll go delve into that a little bit heavier than once it gets going. And then the economy went sour. So.
Yeah, and I think we were very sympathetic to him when he came here, you know, based on what happened with the economy, the whole timing, you know. I don't think there was one sympathetic year, but I also think that it might be advantageous for the board to have some clear definition of some of the terminology.
Right.
I mean, some of you know vested and goes in one ear and out the other, some of these terms, and I should know it, but that's something kind of new to me.
Well, you have to come up with a definite definition of what active and substantial development means. Does it mean all the roads are in to a certain extent, like a binder coat? Does it mean all drainage is in as far as it can go before you build a house or something? I mean, what's the level? What's the threshold? You know, is it a percentage of how much everything is going to cost, say 30%? I got to kind of come up with something, even if it's general in the terminology.
But it seems to me that this is probably not the first time that question's come before the board.
Oh,
And there's
it's
got to be
perpetual,
got to be some precedent for it.
yeah, well, it's usually,
Defining the terms, you mean? Yeah.
Well, especially the issue about
Active
and substantial.
Active and substantial.
Right.
Yeah.
well, I don't know what Dick's experience has been, but a lot of times it comes down to roads, because you can't get to the sites to do anything until you have your preliminary roads in there, so, or whatever else you need, if you need cisterns or...
Yeah, I mean, it could be linked to roads, it could be linked to roads and 1 building out of 4, or what, you
Right,
know,
depending on what it is, yeah.
2 out of 5, or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
Something, percentages, basically.
Yeah, it's a good faith effort, not just cutting a few trees, and, because the reason the vesting is, Mike, that it indemnifies you against your approval expiring and any zoning changes. So if somebody just goes in there and, you know, turns a couple rocks over and says, hey, I'm vested, and your zoning changes totally as to where it really wouldn't allow that kind of development. you know,
And I think
so.
the reason for that was not because he was, it was just the pure timing of it and what happened to the economy, so. I know I'd like to be as sympathetic as I can, but
Yeah. So shall we address the expiration of the site plan approval on May 1st, excuse me, May 3rd? These dates are making me crazy.
sure.
Which is our regular work session, because we've
Sure.
got subcommittees lined up on the 19th, which we're doing a substitute work session for, and I think that's going to, I think this approval extension issue requires its own
Okay.
block of time, because I think we need to talk about it, plus then we have the drainage thing.
So that brings us to item number 8, unfinished and other business.
Okay.
Yes.
I told you about waiting on Attorney Radigan's response. I did some research on, remember we were having the conversation about upping the application fee cost for our newspaper ads. And I queried a bunch of towns around us, and everybody's doing something different, but the upshot of it is, I mean, some people include it as a higher number in their overall application fee per lot, you know, they prorate it, and anyway, the upshot is everybody's charging more than we are, because what we're charging is not paying for what it's costing us. So I think I had put forth a number, maybe $60, which is $15 more than we're
Right.
Sure.
charging.
60, I guess.
I mean, we're not trying to gouge anybody,
No.
but we can't run at a deficit. So whatever this board wants to,
Now, is this part of the
Recommend.
application fee?
It's part of the application process. The fees are broken out, like such and such an amount for a butter for certified letter. If you've got a subdivision, so much for the, first lot, and it depends what it is. But it's for the public notice, and it's fairly expensive to do.
So do you need,
I need a
you
motion.
need a motion?
Yeah.
Anybody want to make a motion that we increase the fee $15 to an amount of $60?
Well, I mean, is that $60 for a subdivision and a site plan? I mean, I guess I'm unclear as to
For
what.
public notice, right?
It's the public notice.
For any public notice that's needed.
And that's usually, some towns do these teeny tiny, literally, like holding this, that's this big, it's about 2-point type and you can't even read it. Ours is usually each application is usually about that much, which is 4-column inches, which is usually around $60 or so, for both.
Yeah.
The fee was $45 across the board, even including zoning. I'm going to ask the zoning board to up it too.
Now, this isn't for single-family building permits and so forth, is it?
No, this is advertising in the newspaper as part of the public notice procedure
Right.
On what?
for any of our public hearings.
For
When we have
anything.
applications come in, we have to put an ad
For
in the
any
newspaper.
application?
Any,
Single-family or
whatever comes before
whatever
the board.
comes in?
Anything that we have to put into the newspaper to say it's a public hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have, if we only have one hearing, so it's sort of the full ad with, the town of Plymouth, planning board, but, all that sort of heading kind of stuff. I mean, so that ad costs $60?
Usually, because it's the heading. The thing is, we don't usually have multiple applicants, more than 2 or 3. So maybe in some case, we'd be making $180 for that one ad insertion with 3 different applicants. But trust me, we're losing money in other places, so it really does kind of,
Point of order, is there a motion on the floor now?
Here is Mr. Kelly, I believe, so we have
I'd like to second his motion.
Yeah.
any discussion on the motion to increase the fee for the newspaper ad from $45 to $60? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, so that
So agree.
has changed. That brings us, anything else on unfinished or other business?
nope.
Brings us to item number 9, public comments. Okay. Item number 10, a motion, entertain a motion to
Make a motion, we adjourn. right?
second. Okay, well, Mr. Kelly, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Here we go. Meeting's over at 7:23.
Sharon drafted that.